All right, and welcome to week one of COMP391. It's Intro to Game and Simulation. That's what we're doing here. Again, my name is Tom, and what I want to do in the beginning is share a couple of things with you. One of them is the outline. Let's talk about the outline a little bit. So again, prerequisites, you've already done COMP100, which means you have an idea of C#, a little bit of scripting and stuff like that as well. Which is good. COMP391, are you doing that this semester for some of you guys, right? So you're doing that with Sajit, if I'm not wrong? Who is it? Oh, Narendra. He's great, right? Narendra, you're going to be fine with him. He's, he's someone that normally does stuff. You don't agree? Oh, good. He's fantastic. Good friend of mine. He's someone that has the right mindset, right? You guys will learn fine from him, right? So, anyways, with those two courses, with this one, with other things, you're going to be ready for Comp 305 in the fall, right? If that's when it's going to happen for you. Okay, let's take a look at a couple books. So one of them is, even though it seems a little old, 2012 now, and it's funny, when I say 2012, we look at 2012 and we think the book is old, right? It's not that old. 2012, we're talking about game development essentials. A lot of the stuff that Jeannie Novak talks about here in the book, I think it's a good book. Right? I think it's something that you can learn from. Remember, we're talking about different types of games in this course, different types of stuff to understand how to make games. Because remember, we want to understand games to make our own, right? We can't create, a lot of us can't create from a vacuum. We can't just like all of a sudden, boom, we have this idea and we're going to have the $1 million idea. It's good to understand games. The other book is, even though it says a textbook, I would say this one is more of a recommendation. This Game Development Essentials Simulation. It's also by the same people, Jeannie Novak, and she also contributes to this other guy. But more or less, it's an older book. They talk about simulations in gaming and how to create military simulations and all this other stuff, other applications of gaming. Not just, because remember, we want to make you as employable as possible. You're in the game, in interactive gaming, kind of program. But what we want to say is, hey, the stuff that you learn here, there's so many more applications going to be coming out from a real-world industrial perspective and commercial uses, as opposed to just creating your own indie studio, right? I mean, it's great if that's what you want to do, but it takes a lot of dedication and a little bit of luck, right, to come up with something that'll catch, right? So you can make the next Angry Birds or whatever it's going to be you're going to make, right? So that's why we try and give you a little bit more of a broader education. This is one of these courses that gives you a little bit of extra stuff. So we're going to be talking about a few things in this course. One of them is, even though it doesn't say it in the outline, and I'll show you the outline. It says, first of all, let me correct a couple things. And these are a little bit of adjustments I'm going to make, okay? Test 1 and Test 2, if you think of what they are, if they're weighted 30% each, they're exams. To me, that's a scary thing, right? 30% for each test, that means like, we can all have a great time, right? And then all of a sudden your exam comes and you're like, duh, right? So I don't like that. So I want to break this down a little bit. And if you agree, if all of you agree, what I'd like to do is introduce a couple of additional tests. So there'll be a test, kind of a mid-chapter, between now and the midterm, right? I'll probably put another test worth around 10%, something like that, to take away from the 30 that's going to hit you on midterm. I don't like that. Right, so midterm will be worth 20%, a little bit more, something you can swallow, right? I'm going to do the same thing for the final. So you'll have another kind of test, and I'm going to show you I kind of plot things out from when I do my lessons, I plot my folders that way too. For an example of that would be, here's where I left lesson 1. By next week, I should give you assignment 1, something to do with what we've talked about this week, pretty much. And then test 1 will be around week 4. That's when I'm thinking it'll be around, right? So if you notice, week 7, which is kind of midterm, will be where you get your midterm test for 20, right? And then if you notice the assignments, we'll talk about these in a second. So again, they're going to be broken out somewhere in between. So you have tests and assignments, enough that you'll be, I would say, fairly comfortable with Blender as a tool by the end of the course, and other tools. I'm going to give you all kinds of little tools to make you, to prepare you. To use things, some graphic tools, not to make you designers necessarily, but for you to understand 3D space, 2D space, We'll talk about these things so that way when you go into Comp 305, you're very comfortable, right? There's nothing. We're not going to see something that's completely brand new, right? Other than the Unity interface, if you're not used to Unity. Maybe if we have time by the end, we'll even touch a bit on Unity. We'll introduce Unity a little bit, kind of bring it up. I'm also not going to ignore other areas, like for example, Unreal has just come out with their kind of free version of Unreal 4, right? So between Unreal using C++ and Unity using C#, we've chosen Unity as our main platform. But both, I think there's advantages and disadvantages from using both, and I will discuss both of them, right? But remember, Unity is the way we're going to go from, what's kind of required. Who doesn't have the handout? I kind of gave a handout for pass this down to this gentleman here as well. And I'm liking this. I'm liking that you guys are all together. I think we're missing. There's a girl we're missing, which is kind of odd because usually I don't get any girls in the class, right? For gaming. I think his name is Barbara, right? Anyway, so you guys. Again, we're going to be talking about, if you look at the lessons up there, I'm going to see if I can bring it a little down a little bit so you guys can see it. And again, what I see and what you see might be slightly different. So again, testing, if you guys agree, even though the outline says 2 tests worth 30% each, that's crazy to me. Like that'll clock you in the head, right? It's too much, right? I want to break those out a little bit and give you an extra test between now and midterm, right? And I'm targeting around week 4, okay? So anyone have any disagreements around that? Because if you do, now's the time to speak about it. You can always send me an email as well if you have an issue. All right, so that's when test 1 is going to come in. And again, so if you look at it now, that means we'll have 4 tests, right? 2 smaller tests and 2 larger type exam type things. Each of the tests and exams, I don't frequently do just multiple choice and that kind of stuff. By the way, everything I do, guys, is online, right? There's not going to be anything written. You don't have to ever bring a pen except to sign in to say that you're here, all right? So there's not going to be some kind of like Scantron you're going to fill out or anything like that. It's purely going to be on eCentennial, MyCentennial. I'm going to share everything with you online and all that kind of stuff. So that's the way I work, and that's how your test will be as well. So you do your tests. Part of it will be a theoretical piece, right? We'll talk about some multiple choice, true and false, whatever. And there might be, depending on the timing we have, there might be a practical piece because we're going to be using Blender and other tools. I'm going to say, hey, build this. And that might be something that you can do within an hour or 2. So that'll be how tests are laid out, right? Now the assignments, it says that there are 4 assignments. However, I'm not sure if this was an error on the actual outline. But if you look at the outline itself from a scheduling perspective, you see assignment number 1, assignment number 2, some tests, 3, and then there's 4. It's not there, right? So I've had to space them out a little bit only because I want to give you some time to do all your assignments. So you have assignment number 1, which I'm going to probably give you next week, 10%. That's probably what it's going to be worth. Assignment 2 will be after test 1, which is probably around week 5. So you'll have, if you think about it, I'll give you a couple weeks, maybe 2-3 weeks to do your assignment. So you won't be stressed out to do it, and I want to make it fun. So it'll be something to do with what we learn together in class, right? Something to do with your game design document. You'll probably be coming up with one of those in this class for sure. There's going to be something to do with 3D Blender. You're going to have to submit some models or do a little bit of modeling to demonstrate that you understand the 3D. If you don't understand 3D and you're doing it, your gaming course, I don't know, right? It's going to be challenging for you to really be successful. So. That's part of it, and then and those kind of things. So everything we learn, there'll be different piece parts that we'll go over in the course itself, and I'll try and hit those major areas. Anything we cover in class, I should have a PowerPoint to back it up. I may not read everything on the PowerPoint. I don't do that, but I will share it with you up online there. Whether it's today or by the end of the week, you'll have it. Right? I'm going to try and get them out ahead of time. Where if I can get all the PowerPoints all taken care of, at least you can use those as reference materials. And again, you'll have the videos that are going to be all up on YouTube, and I'll kind of share the playlist with you by the end of the week. All right, any questions around this? This is kind of our structure, and that's the way we're going to be doing things. It's going to follow in line with what we're talking about here. Again, if you look at what we're talking about today, it's kind of an intro. And then we're going to cover a little bit more than just historical elements by Friday, because we meet on Fridays as well. right? So it'll be Wednesdays at 12:30 to 2:30 and Fridays from 4:30 to 6:30. Why that bloody time? I don't know, right? I know you guys want to, a lot of you want to be in the pub someplace else on Fridays at 4:30. Please don't miss Friday, because then I'll be lonely, right? I'll be the only one in here, and it'll be not good, right? I know it's Friday on summer, right, which is also bad, right, because you guys want to take off and do whatever you're going to do. I will be planning stuff for Fridays too, so it's not just like Wednesdays will be the only class. And I'm also going to break up my lab lecture kind of thing between both days. So there's always something going to be delivered differently on each day, right? Next week we'll be talking about more player elements. The week after, game elements. We're going to be following pretty much the book chapter by chapter. This isn't accurate. Actually, it's chapter 1 and 2 this week, chapter 3, and then chapter 4 and 5 as we go forward until we get to the end, which is we're going to be talking about different kinds of things. And if you actually look at the outline, which I also will share with you online, more or less what this outline says, almost to the I mean, with minor adjustments like I mentioned, we'll be following the outline. Okay? So it's not like you're going to be surprised that I'm going to introduce something else. I'm not going to ask you to program in this class very much at all. Why? It's not really a programming class, right? Only because by now you should only have under your belt COMP100, right? So you just kind of learn how to program. Some of you have never done it before. I know that. Who's never programmed before COMP100? That's okay, right? Because that's normal, right? That's how it should be here. That's why you're coming to college, right? And that's why I can't really introduce to you more complicated, programming concepts like object-oriented design so much, because you're going to learn that right now this semester with Comp 123, right? You should get classes and objects. Have you guys had Comp 123 yet? This week? You guys all in the same class too? Most of you? Different sections maybe? Right. So if you've done that, or if you're doing that, that's fine. But what you're going to be doing with Comp 123 is they're going to talk about advanced methods in C#. They're going to be talking about classes. And these are the things you need to know how to do when you script in Unity. Right? So if you don't know classes and objects, Unity scripting is going to be very challenging for you with mono-develop, and so on. So to me, this is a good segue. This course is going to be a good segue into understanding tools, concepts, 3D, lighting, texturing, bump maps. We're going to be talking about paths. We're going to build a few games without coding whatsoever, all using logic bricks, right? With Blender. We're going to be talking about things like sensors and actuators and all kinds of other stuff. Maybe if we have time, we'll get into a little bit of rigging for character, a little bit of animation for games, all that kind of stuff. So you have a lot of concepts and the ability for you to create even the basic tools so you can have some fun in COMP305, which would be in Game Programming 1. Phew, so that's a big mouthful. Questions? A little bit about my background. I've been playing games, like I said, for probably going on 25 to 30 years now, right? I still play games today. I love things like, if you notice, I got a couple of things going on. I still play things like Borderlands. I like a lot of RTS stuff, like SimCity. I'm more of that kind of guy. I do a lot of first-person shooter stuff as well. I like I'm into Diablo. I'm still into that stuff. I haven't had a chance to play Destiny because I really don't have time to play a console game these days, and I don't have a PC. I have a Mac, which is kind of weird. And something that I've decided to do lately over the last little while, right? But I started off way back in the day when there was no consoles. There was, I had a Commodore 64 back in the day, so I'm an old guy, right? And because of that, I've been playing games for a long, long time. I play desktop games like Dungeons and Dragons even today, right? With my kids, I've taught them how to do it. Right, so I'm a gamer. I understand game mechanics. I understand how to play games, how to make games, how to mess games up, how to mess up the next player. Right, I like all kinds of things. I like hacking games. Right, and I love programming. That's the thing I love to do. Right, so I've been doing that for a long, long time. So what I'm going to try and do is give a little bit of that to you. And again, like I mentioned earlier, I also do other gaming courses. One of them is COMP391, which is the web game programming course, which is purely with HTML5, CSS3, JavaScript, and nowadays I'm using TypeScript because it's a superset of JavaScript, which is awesome. And hopefully in the fall you'll see me for COMP305, right, which is Game Programming 1 with Unity. So that's what I do, and I work very closely together with Professor Narendra. So if you if anything pretty much that he does, I try and work within his kind of style of teaching and so on. I do push you guys a little bit. I'll be honest with you. I'm going to push you. If I see you guys are good at a lot of stuff, I'll introduce more things, right? But only because I want to make you better, not to fail you, right? It's not about that for me. It's about something you can take away from this course to make yourselves better gamers, better developers, and you know, other things like that. Questions before we move on? So that's kind of part one in a nutshell. Like, I wanted to kind of introduce what we're doing. Before we get into the PowerPoint slides, what I'd like you to do on the computer in front of you, because we're going to be talking about Blender a little bit in the second half, the second hour today, is I'd like you to go to look and see what I'm talking about with Blender. So if I go to Blender, if I just type in Blender on Google, I say blender.org, not the blender that you make shakes with, right? And if you notice right now, Blender is at 2.7.4, right, or 2.74. Again, Blender is a kind of open source 3D engine, if you will. It has different aspects to it, which we'll be exploring, right? And I think there's only one gentleman here who doesn't have my shortcuts. Just as a requirement before we get into it. And so what I'm asking you to do is, on the computer in front of you, most likely, it doesn't have Blender, right? So download it now and install it. It doesn't take long, right? If you guys can download and install Blender, the latest version, 2.74, right? That way when we get to that time in the second hour, right, we can get into it and then we won't have a delay, right? The other thing is that one thing you do need with Blender is you need a 3-button mouse, right? You do need that, right? And we all have that. But just in case you install it at home, right, and you try and use it with a touchpad on your laptop or whatever, not a good idea. I highly recommend you have a 3-button mouse. And most likely you're going to need some kind of larger keyboard like the one in front of you that has a number pad. If you don't have the number pad and if you don't have a 3-button mouse, Blender becomes much more challenging to use. The shortcuts that are in front of you that I've given you this handout with all these shortcuts, these are the basic shortcuts to switch modes, to to do a few things, and we need to remember these shortcuts as you go forward, right? When you do your test, exam, whatever, you're going to have this sheet. Everything for me is open book 99% of the time when it comes to your practical piece. When it comes to when you do an exam or a test with me, when it comes to multiple choice, true, false, all that kind of stuff, that's closed book. You have to understand concepts. When we talk about concepts, that's what I'll be testing you on. Will I be testing you on some history? Yeah, you should know a couple things historically about games. You should understand, if someone was to talk to you about a Commodore 64, you should know what that is. Because it's influenced the way gaming works today. So you have to understand that from that perspective, right? Do I expect you to know dates? No. I don't think you need to know that 1982, Conan the Barbarian was out, right? And, a lot of stuff, it influenced gaming. I don't need you to know that, right? Or that Star Trek II came out in 1982 with Khan, right? You don't need to know that either. But I'll talk about it, right? So let's, but Blender you need to know. You need to understand and download. And every so often, Blender comes up with an update, okay? Like my version of Blender probably is 2.73 now, right? And I'm going to have to eventually update it. So I'm going to launch it to show you what it looks like for a second. Here's my version of Blender. And again, Blender is cross-platform, right? So it doesn't just work on, there it is, 2.74. It doesn't just work on Windows PCs. It works on Macs, works on other environments as well. And if you notice, it gives you this 3-dimensional kind of environment, and we're going to talk about how to navigate this and how to use it properly. What I'd ask is for you not to do this while I'm talking, though, because that would be you just won't listen, and you'll have too much fun playing with Blender, and then you'll just ignore what I'm saying, right? So I will talk about Blender, I promise. We will get to it in the second hour. And usually what I try and do is do all this ugly PowerPoint stuff the first hour, and then the second hour we have fun, right? Because that's what I want you guys to do. I want you guys to come out of here going, wow, man, we did this really cool thing today with Blender that I'm going to use for 305 when I get into Game Programming 1. Or I'm going to try it out at home. So that's really what Blender looks like in a nutshell.
Is there a place we can access the syllabus online?
I will put it up online probably at the end of the day. Okay. Right? So you'll have everything. You'll have the outline, and you just remember the changes. For those people who just came in later or whatever, just remember that I am switching up just make some slight adjustments to the syllabus. It'll look more like this in terms of weeks. Again, assignment 1 will be week 2. Your first test will be week 4. Assignment 2 will be week 5. Midterm, of course, week 7. And we have a weird split this semester. I think it's May 2 for, I'm not sure if it's a split then. That's when our midterm, that our reading week is. I think it's the May 2 for. It's kind of weird. We go like 4 or 5 weeks and then we're into like a split or something like that. I don't know if, or I'm not sure if it's Canada Day or something like that. One of those weird things. So we don't have exactly, it's not a 7 and 7. Like sometimes, you know, you go to some programs have a 7 and 7 split, right? I don't think it's like that this semester, and we'll talk about more as we get towards the end. So yeah, midterm, and then assignment 3 will be week 9, just after the break, the midterm, and then test 2 will be week 11, and then assignment 4 will be week 12. What I'm going to try and do is see if I can get these assignments to all link together in one way or another. So it's not like going to be like this random assignment that I'm getting, and it has nothing to do with assignment 2, 3, 4, and whatever. If you notice, I mean, I try and do more project-based learning, so I'm going to do more. These assignments are going to be weighted equally. They'll be worth 10% or so each, right? So I could produce exercises as well, and I may do a quiz, some kind of random thing that happens on a day, or something that I want you to do for bonus if you're physically here. Okay. Again, before we move on with the PowerPoint, any questions around this stuff? So I'm talking about structure of the course. And again, if you have any issues, questions about the course and why we're doing it the way we're doing, more or less I'm following the outline and with some minor adjustments in terms of how we're doing the assignments and the tests. Okay. I'm just going to pause the recording now and go to the second section. And I do that, I pause the recording because then, you know, the first part is here's my intro, this is what the course is about. And then in the next video, we'll talk about the PowerPoints and do a little bit more about the history of games.